Yes, a warm welcome to the Congress coverage by patients today, and Mamma Mia. Today we report from the ESMO, the European Society of Medical Oncology Congress, which just took place in Barcelona. My name is Alexandra von Korff, and together with Professor Marc Thill, we attended the Congress and brought back an interesting study that we would like to discuss now.
Yes, Alex, things are about to get sporty for you out there. And the great thing is that studies like these are now making their way into the major, what we call oral presentations, meaning the main sessions where results are presented. It is about early breast cancer. First of all, hear this disclaimer for your awareness, as well as my conflicts of interest arising from various studies. Although in terms of sports, I actually have no conflicts of interest except that I don't do it enough. Yes, it's about sports, exactly. And a study that was presented here again emphasized the importance and significance of personalized physical activity, or in other terms, in modern terms, if I take care to ensure that someone exercises and sticks with it, and if I motivate them, does that have a greater influence than simply saying, why don't you do something, and then you do something? So I think everyone who has ever worked with a personal trainer knows this. I also did that for a while. It was great because he always said, you have to do this or do that. You always went there because you knew if you didn't go, then you would have to pay extra money. And that is always a basis for motivation. Therefore, the study is naturally relevant for everyone with the beautiful name Emovoir Study, a French study that has dedicated itself to this topic, as already reported. And quite a few patients, 684 patients, were divided to engage in physical activity. Standard recommendation, do something. And indeed the other arm, the so-called experimental arm, received coaching and monitoring with such variables. You might be familiar with that. Well, I don't have that band around my neck. No, not around the neck, exactly here around the wrist. And smartwatches, rings, and so on, everything that exists. And interactive video sessions for a period of 4 months. And then there was an additional 8 months of maintenance. It was about 12 months, people doing what they are supposed to do, and it is not monitored, and the others receive active support and monitoring of what they did as sports. And in the end, the primary endpoint was, of course, the change in physical and mental health from baseline to after 12 months. But what they also wanted to see was the quality of life after 4 months. So there were two options. Personalized and a bit left alone with the sport. And I say this so deliberately because that also will be my recommendation later. Who participated there? You can see here how old the patients were so that you also have an overview. There were 25% patients over 60 included, and 65% of the patients were undergoing therapy. Because everyone who is undergoing therapy says, I am so tired and I am struggling with the chemotherapy. It just doesn't work somehow. And I once had a patient in my life who, during her chemo, ran the New York Marathon in a break between 2 cycles, but that will probably remain an anecdote. Yes, I believe that's not what usually happens, but in fact over 87% were over 40 years old, and it is simply important to say these were not exactly the young patients. These were also patients, a quarter of whom were over 60, and these patients have mostly been treated. In total, 54% were overweight, severely overweight. Just to sketch the collective of these individuals, because there are certainly some who might say, no, I feel too fat, I can't do it, I have been treated, I can't do it. Here, the people have been able to do it, and here you can see again the distribution regarding the activity during the study, further divided into very little active, extensive, and moderate, so it indeed actually balances out quite well in terms of what was done specifically at the beginning and what was done exactly after 4 months, and then in detail what was done afterwards. After 12 months, it actually fluctuates a bit. So now it is not like at the beginning. As you can see, the bars on the left side are all higher. But this is indeed something that can be observed here. And the activity, one must simply say it, which refers to the smaller proportion, or let's say the proportion with lower activity in both groups decreased, while then intensive activity increased. That means there are people who are motivated and they also find it fun and they do it. These are probably the ones with intrinsic motivation who simply say, I have to do this and others. And unfortunately, that is the raw nature of humanity, as we know from daily life. They have to be pushed a little more. And what you also see is that especially in the group with this personalized program, a noticeable increase was observed after 4 months in this intense activity. So one can say they were then motivated, as I have said. So when my personal trainer says, no way, you need to push yourself, do another set. Then I said, I don't want to. He said, yes, you have to get motivated now. And then you do it.
The inner obstacle is simply stifled.
The inner obstacle, exactly. It gets a decisive blow. Exactly. So what you clearly see here are the various influences on the physical and mental health. This is then assessed with forms, but also evaluated in these variables. And then you simply see differences. What is the baseline? So before, after 4 months, and after 12 months. And there you can see that there is indeed this significant and notable increase in overall physical and mental health values.
Now, you have to explain these graphics. One cannot understand them at all, right?
Yes, those at the end, those lines are confidence intervals. That means these are the patients in the group who participated, who were involved. And this box in the middle, this essentially summarizes what is presented as the median, the average. If we put it in simple terms, then all the patients are in there. ITT is always the initial investigator, so those patients, all of whom participated in the school. And then M stands for month 4. And that is what the study also wants to evaluate. They want to say that we simply supported the patients for 4 months and then let them go. Is this more meaningful than those patients who are not supported at all? And where do both end up in the end? And here in this plotting on these graphs, there you can really observe the differences in terms of you have to show these curves, p-values. P is always statistical. Is that statistically significant or not? And if you then take the big curve on the left side, then we see a p-value of approximately 0.19. This is not statistically significant, but one can also see a bracket within the baseline and 4 months, which is statistically significant. And while one might not see this from these different heights, right now, when comparing the time periods with each other, you find that between baseline and after 4 months, there is indeed a significant improvement in overall physical and mental health, but that this tapers off again. And perhaps the audio quality is actually better. That's why in such congresses, sometimes one sits and is happy that the presentation is held and that one does not just get something to read. And when you then look at this forest plot here, this is again a representation. Now here, everything that is on the left side is then, so to speak, better for the control arm, and on the right side better for the experimental arm. And then the following is plotted: age and what type of physical activity and what treatment is being carried out. So one just looks at which specific parameters are affected or which subgroups experience an influence through this more intensified and personalized and motivated physical activity over 4 months. And it shows that it is particularly the older patient who benefits from it and the younger patient less so. And that might somehow be the case because one is younger and is already more agile anyway, and that especially for the older patient, it is very meaningful to carry out such a sports program. Therefore, we have also summarized it here on the right side, demonstrating that it works particularly well there. Now you might say, well, 4 months, what is that really? We've discussed this with the 4 months, but somehow you have to form such groups and establish such cutoffs at some point. Therefore, one can say, yes, exercise is generally good. Alex and I have discussed this again beforehand. So the current recommendation is 2 × 45 minutes of strength training per week. This is very important, mainly for those who are already postmenopausal and to counteract osteopenia and osteoporosis, which can arise from any therapy. And then also at least 360 minutes a week in the aerobic zone. At one point, one patient said she had read an English article and she said, look, it says aerobic here. I don't like that at all. I said, aerobic simply means that you are in the aerobic zone when doing sports. That's just a translation problem.
Yes, but that's already an announcement. You also have to be able to incorporate that into everyday life. And of course, you also have to be physically capable of handling it. I always find it very discouraging when something like that is said, because I think it always immediately creates an image that I have to do high-performance sports here. And often it is not like that at all. It is not aerobic, but it is indeed just that one makes an effort during the time. And that is, again, very individual. For some, it is climbing stairs, that's enough. Or that one might forgo it while others say, no, I already do that. I have to go for a proper jog and sweat. That varies quite individually for everyone. And that's precisely the same thing with strength training. But to get back to the
study, wonderful. Just to briefly make the connection, absolutely right. That is very individual. It is important to motivate, and that's why I also wrote my interpretation. What does that mean for everyday life? We put a lot of thought into this, and in another take, we will address how I can help my patients stay committed to their therapy, because who doesn't undergo therapy, does not receive it, does not benefit from it, and then the risk of recurrence increases. So we are considering whatever options. And we really discussed it on site and said, it's simply unfortunate and sad that after 4 months the patients are left alone. And then that was basically it. Of course, one can say, sure, that's a study, but what we see here is that if you monitor the patients for 4 months, it has an effect. If you don't check anymore, then there isn't. And that actually tells me we must equally pay attention to ensuring that my patient is physically active. I must somehow control it. And I mean, who is supposed to do that? We have no personnel resources anyway, but ideally, of course, everyone would get such an ankle monitor and then we could read the data. Who actually wants that? Do they want to be tracked? One then asks. No, of course not. Nobody wants to go there either. But I believe that in our conversations with the patients, we make an effort to focus on ensuring that they engage in physical activity and that they stay committed.
Yes, I mean, there are also studies where you regularly go and do a bit of exercise. Of course, if one can definitely participate in something like this long term and not just for 4 months, I think then it's also perhaps something like peer pressure. You say, okay, they are waiting for me, so I have to go there too. Unlike when I'm sitting on the sofa at home and say, now I somehow have to motivate myself. So I can completely relate to that. And the other thing is, of course, I also think that when you leave therapy, you also have this effect that you are suddenly no longer closely monitored. And that it also gives you a bit of security when someone looks again and says, no, you're doing it right with the exercises, or great that you're back again. So if there were a program to keep someone engaged, I would find that great. And if it is through wearables, sometimes it's true that even a small app can also motivate a little. Who knows what else might be invented in the future?
I had a colleague who once said, I'll be right there for dinner. I still have to complete the 10,000 steps. And then she just kept running around the block where the restaurant was located.
But that's better than those who just sit in the meeting. I haven't met my steps yet and then start moving their watch around.
And a patient to whom I said, you know what? You need to do a bit of exercise and keep track of it with a wearable. And then she said, I gave my husband this as a Christmas gift. And then he met a student and gave him 50 euros so that he would run with the thing twice a week for him. And she wondered that he had running routes she never would have expected him to have.
Yes, that definitely works too. So the conclusion is it helps everyone to get motivated and stay motivated. But however, additionally, what my oncologist said, and I don't know whether you confirm that, he said it's not just that you feel better. When you exercise during therapy...
That's right. Therefore, everything is interconnected and one must view the whole picture.
Yes, good. That was our contribution on the topic of sports. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.